She was sent away for being too clever. Then a duke arrived with a proposal and no apology. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, sealed with wax the color of dried blood, and Eleanor Whitfield knew before she opened it that her life was about to end and begin at the same time. 6 years earlier, her own family had sent her away in the middle of the night, with a single trunk and instructions never to speak of why. She had been 17. Her crime had never been named aloud, though everyone in the county understood it. She read too much. She asked too many questions at dinner. She corrected a bishop's arithmetic in front of 40 guests and refused to apologize for being right. A clever woman, her mother had said, folding a shawl around Eleanor's shoulders as the carriage waited, is a burden no family can carry. Now Eleanor stood in the small parlor of the boarding house in Bristol where she had spent 6 years teaching other men's daughters to read, sew, and stay quiet, and she stared at a seal she recognized. The Ashworth crest. The family that owned half the county she had been exiled from. She broke it. Inside was a single line, in handwriting she had not seen since she was 17 years old. *I am coming to Bristol. Do not leave before I arrive. W. William Ashworth. The boy who used to sit beside her at her father's table and lose every argument to her, laughing instead of sulking like the other men did. The boy who had inherited a dukedom 2 years ago. According to the newspapers she was not supposed to read but did anyway. She had not seen him since the night she was sent away. He had not written. Not once. Not when she arrived in Bristol with nothing. Not when she wrote to her mother 3 times, and received silence 3 times. 6 years of silence, and now 4 sentences and a wax seal. She told herself she would not wait for him. She told herself this while pressing her one good dress and pinning her hair the way she used to, before she learned that looking too clever was as dangerous as being it. He arrived on Thursday in a carriage too fine for the narrow street, and the entire boarding house went quiet when he stepped down. He looked older, steadier. There was gray at his temples that had not been there before, and something in his face that had not been there either. The particular exhaustion of a man who has spent years being obeyed by everyone and understood by no one. Eleanor. He said her name like he was afraid it might not still belong to her. Your Grace. She did not curtsy. Something crossed his face. Hurt, maybe, or recognition that the coldness was fair. I've come to ask you to marry me, he said before she could send him away, before the landlady could finish gasping in the doorway. I know I have no right to ask. I know 6 years of silence buys me nothing. I'm not going to explain it away. I only ask that you let me try. Eleanor felt something old and dangerous rise in her chest. Not hope, she told herself, never hope again, just anger with nowhere to go. You let them send me away, she said quietly. You sat at that table. You heard what they called me. And you said nothing. I was 19, he said. My father controlled everything I had. I had no title, no money of my own, no. I was 17, she said. And I had less than you did. Yet somehow I survived it without writing letters of apology 6 years too late. He did not argue with that. She noticed he didn't argue with that, and some small, exhausted part of her respected him for it. There's something you don't know, he said instead. About why you were sent away. I only learned it myself 8 months ago, when my father was dying. The room seemed to tilt slightly. This was the moment Eleanor had waited 6 years for without admitting she was waiting, the truth beneath the word clever, the real reason a 17-year-old girl had been put in a carriage in the dark. Not here, she said, glancing at the landlady still frozen in the doorway. Walk with me. They walked along the river, where the fog made everything softer than it should have been, and William told her what his dying father had confessed. Eleanor's cleverness had never been the true offense. The true offense was what she had noticed at 14, about the Ashworth family's accounts, a discrepancy in a shipping ledger that her own father, managing the estate's business, had quietly helped hide. She had asked an innocent question at dinner about numbers that did not add up. And 2 powerful families, hers and the Ashworths, had decided together that a clever girl who noticed things was more dangerous than whatever they were hiding. Your father sent you away to protect my family's secret, William said. And I believe he protected his own reputation by letting everyone believe you were simply too difficult to keep. Eleanor stopped walking. 6 years of humiliation, of being whispered about, of watching her own mother's face go blank whenever she raised the subject. All of it rearranged itself in her mind into something far uglier than she had imagined. She had not been punished for being clever. She had been punished for being right, and then blamed for being clever so that no one would ask what she'd actually seen. Does your family still have the money? She asked. That came from whatever was in that ledger? Some of it, William admitted. I've spent 2 years trying to trace it. I intend to return what can be returned. That's part of why it took so long to come to you. I didn't want to arrive with only an apology. I wanted to arrive having done something. It was, Eleanor thought, the most honest thing anyone had said to her in 6 years. But honesty was not the same as trust, and trust was not rebuilt with a single walk beside a river. She told him she needed time. He did not argue. He took a room in Bristol, not in her boarding house, a respectful distance away, and for 3 weeks he simply stayed. He did not press her. He asked instead about the school she had built almost by accident, teaching girls who were told, as she had been, that their questions were a liability. He listened when she described the arithmetic mistakes she caught in merchants' ledgers around town, quietly, for a small fee, work she had never told her own family about because she knew exactly how they would see it. One evening, walking her home from the school, William stopped outside her door and said, "I'm not asking you to forgive my family. I'm asking you to consider whether I might be different from them." "You already are," Eleanor said. "You came. Nobody else ever did." Should have been enough. It almost was. Then on a rain-heavy Sunday, a second letter arrived. This one from Eleanor's mother, the first in 6 years, saying that her father was gravely ill and asking her to come home before it was too late. Eleanor sat with the letter for a long time. William offered to accompany her, and she almost refused out of pride before realizing that refusing him now, after everything, would only be pride pretending to be strength. The house she returned to was smaller than she remembered, and her father, thin and gray in his bed, wept when he saw her. Not the tears of a man asking forgiveness, she realized, but the tears of a man relieved to finally stop carrying a lie alone. "I should have protected you," he said, "instead of the money." Eleanor did not tell him it was forgiven, because it was not yet. But she sat beside his bed until he slept, and for the first time in 6 years, she let herself cry too. Not for the girl who had been sent away, but for everything that girl had been forced to become in order to survive it. Her father died 3 weeks later. At the small funeral, Eleanor stood beside her mother, who could not meet her eyes, and beside William, who did not let go of her hand even once. It was there, afterward, walking through the same garden she had left as a frightened 17-year-old, that she finally answered him. "I won't marry you because you're a duke," she said. "And I won't marry you out of gratitude for a debt you're only beginning to repay. But I've watched you for 2 months choose honesty when silence would have been easier. That matters more to me than an apology ever could." "Is that a yes?" William asked, and for the first time since he'd arrived in Bristol, he looked genuinely unsure of anything. "It's a beginning," Eleanor said. "Which I've learned is worth more than people think." They married quietly the following spring in Bristol, not in the county that had cast her out. Eleanor kept her school. William funded 3 more like it in her name, in towns where clever girls were still called difficult instead of gifted. And every year, on the date of the letter with the wax seal, they walked along the same fog-softened river where the truth had finally been spoken aloud. She had been sent away for being too clever. It took her 6 years, one dying man's confession, and a duke with the courage to finally say the truth out loud to learn that she had never been the problem at all. Engagement question. Do you think Eleanor was right to give William a second chance? Or should some silences never be forgiven? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needed to hear it, and let us know in the comments what you would have done in Eleanor's place.